Hi, my name is Cédric Champeau. I work for Gradle on the Gradle open source build tool, and today I want to talk to you about Gradle bin scripts, how to make them shorter, more concise, and more importantly, more maintainable. So to illustrate this, I'm going to explain something I've used regularly. So when I do some talks at conferences or whatever, I obviously have some slides, and because I'm a coder, I prefer to have my slides as markdown language. So in practice here, I'm using ASCII Doctor to convert some markup language, ASCII doc, into HTML pages, which are processed by Reveal.js, which is a JavaScript framework to render some presentations. And then I want to upload those slides to GitHub pages so that people can watch the slides after the presentation. And also I want to convert them to PDF because some sites only accept on PDF, right? So this is something I do quite often, actually. So um, I did this blog post a few weeks ago, and you will find the link in the video description, where I explained that it is a bad trial to dismiss Gradle as a build tool because of its use of code as a build description language. And one of the comments I got from this blog was that the script that I'm going to show you is way too simple. So here it is. This is my build scripts, 9 lines of code, and it does everything I told you. It's going to convert using ASCII Doctor. It's going to download the tooling. It's going to export these pages, generated pages to GitHub pages, and it's going to create a PDF all in 9 lines of code. It looks pretty much declarative to me, right? This is not what people usually think about Gradle builds. And this is the comment I got. They told me, no, this is way too simple. But is it really? That's the question. In fact, if I show you what this build used to look like, we're going to agree. So let's take a look. This is the original build that I had. And this is probably what you most likely see about Gradle builds and what the complaint we hear about Gradle, like, oh, this is actually a build script which is bloated with code. It actually applied some plugins, define some repositories, then add some dependencies, some Ruby gem dependencies. Good luck if you can remember the coordinates there that you have to do if you want to do an ASCII Doctor presentation. Then you have to configure ASCII Doctor J itself. There is some inline creation of the download task to download Reveal.js, etc., etc., etc. So lots of code going on. And then you have those external scripts here, living here, where actually I'm opening the pdf.gradle file, which configures this tool that I use to generate some PDF from the slide deck. And obviously, I also need to configure ASCII Doctor, like telling it what the theme is, etc., etc. So lots of different things going on. So this build is actually not something super nice. I mean, it's actually pretty bloated. And if you just want to focus on generating a presentation, this is a lot of code that you have to do and copy and paste. And this is actually what most people do. They would fork my project, copy and paste this, and maybe tweak it. And this is what I did in the beginning, because the way this is set up is actually copied from the ASCII Doctor documentation, where there was a sample, and the sample was saying, yeah, if you use Gradle, here's what you should do. And it's actually pretty complex. There's a lot of knowledge in there, right? So there's a lot of knowledge, but we can simplify all that, because what do I care about as a user? If all I want is generate an ASCII Doctor presentation, do I really need to write all this? Well, I answered the question already. No, you don't have to. The only thing that you should care about is this 9 lines maximum. Just set the GitHub username that you're going to use to publish those pages, and that's it. Obviously, I need to add some configuration here because I'm using ASCII Doctor diagram. So I'm going to tell, yeah, my presentation uses a special feature of ASCII Doctor. So I'm exposing this in this presentation extension, as we call them in Gradle. But the interesting bit that we need to explain is what this is here is a software component. A Java library is not an ASCII doctor presentation. So there is no reason for the build to look exactly the same. No reason at all. And similarly, a Java library is not a Java application. And a Java application is different from a Quarkus application. It is different from a Spring Boot application. And it is even different from a Micronaut application. All of those different frameworks have different requirements. They model their applications differently. They have a different way of setting the main class. Maybe they have some annotation processes to add. Maybe they use some Maven bombs to introduce dependencies, etc., etc. But there is a lot of knowledge from those frameworks that the user really shouldn't care about. All they should care about is applying a plugin like Spring Boot, Micronaut, whatever, and configures the maximum amount of things for users by default. If we look at this presentation extension, actually what I expose is pretty simple. But if I go here and ask my IDE for completion, I actually have more. I can, for example, say what the highlighter I want to use for my ASCII doctor presentation, or I can say what is the reveal.js version that I'm going to use, or what is the theme that I'm going to use for my presentation. But by default, all those have some conventional values that are actually expressed here in this presentation extension. So by default, we're going to use reveal 3.5, we're going to use the Gradle theme and highlight.js. So if you say nothing, this is what you get for free. And when I'm calling this method use ASCII doctor diagram that you can see here, it's actually adding a dependency transparently. Who cares that this dependency has these gov coordinates? Nobody cares about that. Nobody should care about that. This is not what you care about as a user. As a user, you just want to say, I'm using this feature, give me a way to generate some diagrams and set up the dependencies for me. You shouldn't work at the lower level, the dependencies level. You can, if you want, tweak those after, because this is Gradle bin scripts and you have access to the dependencies, you can change the dependencies, etc. But at a higher level, you should not. This is a software model. This is an application which is modeled. And this is extremely important for maintainability. So something now that you probably wonder is how I came from this build script, which was used, define some tasks, etc., into this plugin. And it's actually pretty simple. It's 2 steps. One was just to move this code that I had in a build script into a build source plugin and then make it a proper plugin. And I'm just going to show you the result here, which is the plugin itself. And what you can see is that it actually applies all these configuration that you had in build scripts, but now it is bundled into a plugin which can be tested. It can have some unit tests, some functional tests, some integration tests for different versions of Gradle, etc., etc. And it's actually doing some configuration that you can that you don't care about, right? Like these plugins that you need to apply, the Jerry plugin, the Java-based plugin, the ASCII doctor plugin, GitHub Pages plugin, all those plugins, you don't need them. You don't need to know that your plugin should use them. And this is a major philosophical difference between Gradle and other build tools. Gradle is a composition model. So you have all those bricks, different plugins, and then you compose those plugins and expose only what you want to expose from those plugins via extensions typically. So the extension I created is the only thing that I want users to configure when they use my presentation plugin. If they want, they can add more tasks, etc., etc., or they could build their own plugin on top of it, but it is a composition model. So this is pretty much what I wanted to show you today. If you're interested in this discussion, you can go on the description of the video. You will find a link to the blog post, or you can find me on Twitter and feel free to ask me some questions. Thank you for watching.